Morning. It's just the two of us, Ken. If you're there, we'll start. There you are. Okay, let's get started. I know we're gonna, again, like I told you, I promised a short daf, but let's do it very comprehensively. And let me find the daf. There we go. So today's daf in Masechet Bava Batra to get started is 166. Kuf Samach Vav. I'm going to start again from the Mishnah, which we read a little bit yesterday. It's a review. It'll take 2 minutes. Says the Mishnah on Gaf Kuf Samachei Amud Bet. Around, whatever. Well, you can see the Mishnah. Katuv ba zuzin mea di'inun sla'in esrin. Right? You write in a get, in a document, I owe you 100 zuz, which is 20 sla'in. Now remember, the math is that a sela is 4 zuz. So 20 sla'in would be 80 zuz, or 100 zuz would be 25 sla'in. So this doesn't add up. Says the Mishnah, Inu ela esrin zuzim. You only get, Inu ela esrin. You only get 20, right? Because you basically get the smaller amount. You'd have to, well, we'll see in a second, but that's the case, right? You have to prove the larger amount. What if you write, continues the Mishnah, kesef, remember my words. What if you write kesef, where am I? No kesef. Zuzin mea dinun tlatin slayim. 100 zuz, that's 30 slayim. Again, math is off. Elu ela mana kesef. You only get 100 kesef, not 30 slayim, which would be 120. If you write, I keep saying that again. Elu ela mana, you only get 100. If you write kesef zuzin, I want to give you silver zuz di'inun of, and period, dot, and imchak. It's then erased. Doesn't say how many silver coins, silver dinarim you want to give. Ein pachot mishtayim. You have to just give 2. You can't say it's 100. You'd have to prove it. So 2 is the minimum. Kesef sil'in di'inun. You say I'm going to give you silver sla'in. Remember, a sela is 4 times. I just said 4 times a dinar, 4 times a zuz. V'nimchak ein pachot mishtayim. You have to give a minimum of 2. If you say darkanot di'inun, and darkanot we said are even larger coins. V'nimchak ein pachot mishtayim. Okay, so that's clear. Says the Mishnah, Katov ba minamala mana minamata matayim. Let's say in the top part of the earlier part of the get of the shtar, it says I owe you 100, and different part it says I owe you 200, or the opposite, milamala matayim milamata mana. Hakol lechachar tachton. You go after the final word, as we say. Says the Mishnah Cain, lama kotfinet elyon. So why do you even repeat it? Right? Repeating it seems like a recipe for disaster. Says the Mishnah, well, it's a good idea. Shim, and I'm going to read our girsa, which is She'im timachek otachat min hatachton. If one letter is erased, yulamed min ha'elyon, you can learn from the higher up part. And in the Masoret Hashas here, you will see that they changed the girsa to im lo katav otechad in the rough Russian the Rif. If one letter is not written, and we'll see in today's Gemara, that's clearly correct. Either it's an explanation of Timchak, or that's really what it should say in the Mishnah, that it's actually not referring to erasures, it's referring to where something is missing, so that you wrote something incompletely, and we'll see the case in the Gemara. Now, says the Gemara today, Tanur Abanan, says the Braita, let's say a person says in a document, kesef, Amar kesef. It doesn't say how much kesef, right? I borrowed silver. It didn't say how much silver. Says the Braita, ein pachot midinar kesef. The minimum amount of silver is a coin of a dinar, which is, whatever amount. It's not an insignificant coin that's worth a dinar kesef. And so that's what you'd have to pay. You couldn't make him pay more, but you don't have to pay less. Can't pay less. If you wrote plural, kesef dinarim, coins of kesef, or dinarim kesef, then you have to have 2 coins. Ein pachot mishnei dinarim kesef. Then you have to give at least 2. And if you write this, very interesting, if you write kesef bidinarim, I'm going to give you silver in coins, so to speak. The fact that you changed it, not to say coins of silver, but kesef in dinarim, that implies that you want to give coins that are gold, which are 25 is times valuable as silver. And so you're saying, I'm going to give you silver coins that are worth 2 gold coins, meaning 50 silver coins, right? It says the right to ein pachot mi bishnei dinarim dahav. You have to give 2 coins of gold value in kesef. So basically what I'm saying is I'm going to give you silver worth coins. Because I didn't say silver coins, I said silver in coins. I must be referring to a different currency, which is gold in those days. And so I want to give you silver worth 2 coins of gold, which is a far higher number. So that's the Breita. Says the Gemara, Amar Mar, where are we? Sorry, my computer, it's a little hard to follow. We're 5 lines from the bottom. Amar Mar, now we're going to analyze each word of this Breita. You said kesef. If I say I'm going to give you silver, it means a minimum of a dinar kesef. In pachot mi dinar kesef. Says Gemara, how do you know? Maybe it's less. Ema naska. Naska always refers to like little tiny pieces of silver, thread of silver, like, not coins, which are more valuable, but little remnants, which are even less valuable. Amar Rabbi Elazar, you're right. If you just said silver, it could mean naska. But here it said, it's somewhere in the star, katuv be matbeya. It said coin. So there was a reference to coinage and silver, maybe separately. So that's how you understand that the silver has to be a silver coin that's worth a dinar. Says, well, a dinar is a reasonable coin. Ema priti. Maybe it's what we call prutot, right? Which are very, very prutos, I think 1/48th, I believe, of a dinar. So, much like a penny, basically, of silver. Like, how do you know that it's referring to a respectable coin? Maybe it's referring to a very cheap coin. Says Rav Papa, you're right. It could be, but it has to be talking about a case Batra de losagi priti de kaspa. It's talking about a neighborhood, a community where nobody made silver prutot, meaning a prutot was such low value that to take a small amount of silver and put it into a prutot, again, which is 1/48th of a dinar, is really, it's a tiny amount. Maybe it's too light. It's not worthwhile. And therefore, they only make prutot out of, as we usually talk about, copper or things like nechoshet, things, right, copper, things that are lower value. So it's not part of the currency. And so again, you always go with what's considered to be normal in that neighborhood. Tanu Rabbanan. So that is the end of that Breita, and we are now going to go to the next Breita, which is gold, which is 3 lines from the bottom. Tanu Rabbanan, dahav. Let's say the person uses dahav, which is the word for gold, right? So you write in a contract, I borrowed gold. You don't say how much. Says the Breita, ein pachot midinar zat dahav. It's exactly the same. This Breita exactly the same as the Breita of silver. It's not less than 1 dinar of gold, which is a small, a substantial coin of gold. If you say dahav dinarim, gold coins, or coins of gold, dinarim dahav, then it's 2. It's plural. Ein pachot mishtei dinarim dahav. Same thing as we said by silver. But if you say dahav b'dinarim, I give you gold in coins, but clearly not the same coin. So by silver, we said, if I give you silver in coins, you meant silver worth the value of 2 gold coins. By gold, it means the opposite. It means I'll give you gold, the value of 2 silver coins, right? Ein pechot mi b'shnei dinarim kesef of dahav. So basically, by saying I'll give you gold in coinage and not using gold coins, you're saying gold in a different currency, in this case, silver, which is the 2 common currencies, 2 common values. So I'm going to give you the value of 2 silver coins in gold, right? Which is much less than 2 gold coins. So that is the same exact thing we said in parallel, in the opposite, mirror opposite of the previous Breita. Ask the Gemara again, now the last word on the second to last line, Amar Mar, dahav. So we're quoting the Breita. Let's analyze the Breita. It says, if you say gold, ein pachot midinar zat dahav. It's not less than 1 dinar worth of gold. Says the Gemara, well, how do you know? Maybe naska, maybe it's little pieces of gold, right? Little strips, little films. They use gold for all kinds of industrial stuff. And it could be a tiny, minute amount. Amar Rebbe Lazar, clearly, again, it has to be the katav matbeya. You're right. There has to be some reference somewhere in the star to it being coins. If we don't know that we're talking about coins, then you are absolutely correct. Gold could just mean a little tiny piece of gold or jewelry or something like that. Says Imar, okay, but even if it's coins, top of daf kuf samach vav and aleph, today's daf, ema priti, maybe it means prutot, tiny little coins of gold, like pennies of gold. Says Gemara, that's not even a question. Before by silver, we said it's a neighborhood where they don't make that. But by gold, nobody makes pennies out of gold, right? Priti dedav lo av the inch. You never make pruta out of gold because, first of all, gold is so valuable to have a pruta's worth would be tiny, very small amount. And obviously, it's not respectable. It's not worthwhile to use of gold. So therefore, no one would do that. What about the following case, the third case? Zahav b'dinarim, which, of course, the Breita, I think, used the word dehav, but the word dehav and zahav, of course, are the same. Right, so you said zahav in our girsa, the second line, which is dahav b'dinarim. I'm giving you gold in coins. We said it means 2 coins of silver. Ein pachot mishtei dinarim kesef. It means the gold of zahav, gold that's worth 2 coins of silver. Says Gemara, why not? Maybe saying, I'm going to give you gold pieces worth 2 coins of gold. Meaning clearly I'm not giving you 2 gold pieces because I would have said 2 gold coins because I would have said gold coins. But I said gold in coins. Maybe I meant I'm going to give you pieces of gold, like raw gold, strips or whatever, that are worth the value of 2 golden coins. How do you know it's silver coins? How do you know switch the type? Says Gemara, Ema dahava pricha, and we give you gold pieces or raw gold, let's say, that's worth tre dinre dahava kamar. Amar Abaya, it's true. It could mean that. But yad balashtar tachtona. You'd have to prove it. Remember, since it's ambiguous, it's not clear whether you mean gold pieces that are worth gold coins or silver coins. You'd have to prove you meant gold coins. So therefore, yad balashtar tachtona, the person holding the shtar has to prove it. You can't prove it. You go to the lower amount, which is silver coins. Ask the Gemara. Now, the Girsa here is obviously very, very unclear. In the Masoret Hashas, they turn this whole parentheses into Ihachi Reisha Nami. That's it. So take out the whole thing and say, what about the Reisha? And the Reisha is 2 parts, right? The Reisha could be the flip side of it, where we said silver in coins. So we said that means silver. I'm going to give you pieces of silver that are worth gold coins. How do you know it means gold coins? Maybe it means silver coins, right? Which would be less. And the first part of this Braita, which is the real Resha, where we actually said, if I give you gold coins, how do you know it means, again, gold coins? Maybe it means silver. So says Rav Ashi, now at the end of the parentheses, Rav Ashi, well, Resha, the Katav Dinri. The Resha, where we said it means gold coins, is where you said the word dinri with a yud at the end, which means dinars, but we're going to see in 1 minute that a dinri is a code name for gold coins. Seifa, the katav dinarim. The end, the seifa, the case we just quoted, was you said dinrin with a regular plural, with a nun at the end, and when you say dinarin, it could be anything. It could be gold or silver, and you'd have to prove that he means gold in order to collect gold because yad balashar tachtona. But the Resha is specifically where you said the word dinri, and when you say the word dinri, that automatically means gold. Says, how do you know that? Umina timra deshani ben dinri le dinarim. How do you have this sort of certainty that there's a difference halachically if you use the word dinri, right? Dinar is the coin, but then you pluralize it. If you say dinri, it means gold. If you say dinarin, it means coins, and it can mean gold or silver. How do you know that? That is based on the following. This is actually should say Ditznan, as the Masoret Hashas says. Ditznan, there's a Mishnah, fascinating Mishnah in Mesechet Taharot that we discussed in Kritut. Fascinating Mishnah, and I'm going to go through it very briefly for 2 reasons, because I promise we're going to finish on time, but also because this is not, it's going to be repeated when we get to Kritut in a couple of years, hopefully, God willing, in good health together. So the Mishnah addresses a very interesting question, which is Ditzan. Let me read this Mishnah in Mesechet Taharot. Ha'isha shahaya hayu aleh safek chamesh leidot. Let's say, remember, a woman, if she gives birth to a baby, has to bring a karban to become tahar. And the karban she brings could be a group of birds. One's a olah and one is a chatat. Now, unfortunately, at least in those days in their medicine, there was very often a time where a woman would bleed and she wouldn't know if she was pregnant or if she had a miscarriage, if it was a fetus, if it was a regular period, if it was an irregular period, it was an infection. And there's certain criteria, which we'll get to in Nida, about what's considered to be a fetus that you have to then bring a karban. It has to be a certain age and a certain, whatever it is. So there were plenty of times, unfortunately, where people were uncertain. So a woman has a menstrual or some discharge. She doesn't know if she has to bring a karban. Now, if you have to bring a karban, you can't become tahar until you bring that karban. So she would basically what's called a suffik leda. Now, usually, remember, for a karban, for a yoledet, you bring a chatat and an olah. An olah, you can always bring a nidava, right? You can always say, I want to bring an olah by misafek. If I owe it, this is the olah. If I don't owe it, this is a gift. But a chatat is never a gift. You can't bring a chatat as a safek, right? And so that's a big problem, is that if you have a safek chatat, what do you do? So we'll get into this in great detail in Masechet Shavuot. But the point here is that by this case, because it's a bird, and if you recall, a chatat of is not brought on the mizbeach. Chatat of is malika, and you put some blood, but you actually burn the whole thing off the mizbeach. So because of that, you can actually bring a chatat of misafek because you don't put it on the mizbeach. So that's some background. Says the Mishnah, Let's say you have a woman, Shahayu Ales Safek Chamesh Leidot. She hasn't been to the Beit HaMikdash in 3 years, let's say, travels hard. She had 5 carbonot lined up. She finally comes for Pesach or Sukkot or whatever, and she has this whole responsibility to bring all these carbonot. She had 5 Safek Leidot, or Safek Chamesh Zivot, which is even easier. But Zivot, remember, are very similar to periods. It just depends on where in the cycle she is and how many days. She got confused about the days. She has 5 Safek Zivot. Says the Mishnah, Mevia karban echad ve'ochelet mizvachim. Look, she's tameh because she didn't bring her karban. If she brings one of these 5 karbanot, she now can eat zvachim because you don't say you're tahar, you're tameh until you bring all 5. You're in a state of what's called mechusar tahara, mechusar kippurim, basically. You're missing your kapara. Once you bring it, you become tahar. So bringing one is enough, meaning to make her able to eat a kachim, okay? But then she has 4 more. But because they're safek, you can't make her bring them because we don't know for sure. So basically, Beit HaMikdash cannot force it. Ein ashar aleh chova. The other 4 are not responsible. She could, she doesn't have to. Hayu aleh chamesh leidot vadaot. Now let's say she's got 5 vadaot. She had 5 children, right? Which again, not so uncommon. She had child after child. She didn't make it to the Beit HaMikdash. It was very hard, of course, to travel. She finally gets there. She's got 5 children she's got to bring a karban for. Or chamesh zivot vadaot, or 5 times she was a zava. Says the Mishnah, Mivia karban echad v'chel b'zvachim. Once she brings the first karban, she's tahar. She was mechusar tahara the whole time, but she brings 1 and she's now tahar. There's no deal you have to bring all 5. But now she's got to bring the rest. Shashar aleh chova. She's got to bring the rest. Okay, so that's the introduction of the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Mesechet Kritut, Maaseh. Now there was an event that happened. And 1 year, let's say, you can imagine this very easily, in my opinion. Like there's a war, as we know nowadays, or there it was even worse. Traffic was really bad. No one could travel for a long time. Finally, there's a ceasefire, there's a peace, and everyone comes to Yerushalayim, and they've got a list. I owe 10 carbonot, I owe 5 carbonot. This is how you would imagine what ended up happening, unfortunately, when they didn't have good travel and good security. So everyone comes to Yerushalayim for Pesach, let's say, and there's thousands of people who need to bring carbonot, and there aren't that many birds, right? So the price of birds goes through the roof. Says the Mishnah, Maaseh, there was a story that happened once where everyone was coming to bring their karban. Ve'amdu kinim b'Yerushalayim b'dinar dinrei zahav. The price of a kin is a set of birds, in Yerushalayim, instead of being, 20 cents, was $100 or whatever. Again, I made up those numbers, but dinrei zahav are very expensive, gold coins, not even silver, right? So it was a fortune, and the people couldn't afford it. So this is an incredible Mishnah. Again, we don't have time today to analyze all the social behavior in this Mishnah, but said Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, I'm going to break the market. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Hama'on hazeh. Ma'on means, is always a language of the one who lives here, meaning I swear by God, basically. Excuse me, I swear by the one who's here. Im alin halayla, if we go to sleep tonight without me being able to make the price, adshiyu b'dinarin. Now that's going to be our proof, right? It was dinrei zahav, it was gold dinars. Said Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, I'm going to break the market and make it so that the price is only silver coins. So it's going to go down from $100 to $5, or it's 1/25th, but to whatever that is, 100 to 5. Yeah, that is 5. 100 to 5. So what did he do? How does he change the market? Says the Mishnah, Nichnas the Beit Din. He went to Beit Din, and he taught the following halacha. You know what? Any woman, a woman who owes 5 definite births, she gave birth to 5 children. She owes a carbon for each one according to the Torah, or she's a chamesh zivot vadaot, she's 5 zivot. I'm changing the rules. She doesn't have to bring 5 carbonot anymore. Mivia karban echad v'ochelet bizvachim, which is what everyone agreed. She brings 1 karban and she can eat the kachim. Ve'ein hashar aleh chova, and she doesn't have to bring the rest. And obviously, this is an incredible thing to do. Not what we're going to discuss today in Daf Yomi. That he basically changed the halacha. Big debates, of course, about how, in order to make the market cheaper, and then obviously wiped out the whole market. Because each person who had a history of having to bring 5 carbonot, 10 carbonot, he basically cut everyone and said, just bring 1 carbon and you're done. And once he said that, turn the page, daf kuf samach vav amabet, amdu kinim bo bayom berivatayim. The end of that day, the birds cost not even 1 dinar, a quarter of a dinar. So they went from $100 to $1, 125. So basically, he wiped out that whole cost, whatever you call it, demand and I don't know the economic words. But he basically changed the whole market by changing the halacha. Sounds very radical, obviously worth discussing. Not today in Daf Yomi. We will hopefully get to it in Masechet Kritut. But that is the Mishnah in Masechet Kritut. That's the Mishnah in Taharot. And got that what we prove from there, of course, is that the word dinari means gold, and dinarim can mean silver or gold. Here it meant silver. So that is the proof. Beautiful case. Says the Gemara now on Kuf Samach Vav on Mebet, the first line, there are only narrow lines. If it says in the shtar, Katuv milamala, one thing, above it says one, but below it says something else, you go with the one below. Says the Braita Tanur Abanan. Yilmad tachton me'elyon, you can learn from the bottom to the top, bi'ot echad. If there's one letter missing, let's say in the bottom part, there's one letter missing, and you look at the top part and the letter is there, meaning it says, I don't know, Shema, and it should say Shimon, without a vav, let's say, then you can learn one letter. But you can't take 2 letters that are missing and add them from the top. Let's use Shimon and say it's 4 letters, Shim, Mem, Ayin, Nun. If it just says Shin, Mem on the bottom, you can't turn that into Shimon. Says I forgot the Gemara's examples. Kigon says the Braita, Chanan mechanani, right? If you can not, this is what you're not allowed to do. You're not allowed to turn Chanan into Chanani, right? This is what you're allowed to do. If it says the word Chanan, which is 3 letters, Chan, Chet, Nun, Nun, right? You can learn that above in the shtar, it said Chanani with a yud at the end, and that's what Chanan meant. Or Anan me Anani. But you can't turn Chen into Chanani, for example. So that's what the Braita says. Ask the Gemara why. Where are we? Fourth line, last 2 words. Why is it that we say 2 letters you can't do? Because Dilma Mitrami Shem Ben Arba Otiot. You might have a name in, say, in the top part of the shtar that is 4 letters. And then Havile Palga Deshma. So you only have 2 letters at the bottom. That's only half a name. It's not most of a name. Says well, if that's the issue, that you need to have most of a name, not half of a name, Yachi Otachatnami. So sometimes 1 letter would be too much as well, because everybody knows our names have two letters, right? We had this week's parsha, Gad or Dan or whatever. Dilma Mitrami Shein Ben Shtei Otiot. Maybe you'll have Gad, and then in the bottom of the shtar, you'll just have a Gimel, and you're saying you're allowed to add the Nun in, but that's only half a name. Havle Palga Deshma. So that can't be the reason, because obviously 2 and 1 would depend on how long the name is, not on every case. Ella says the Gemara, the problem is that you can never fill in the majority. If it's half, you can fill it in, but you can't fill in a majority of a word. And so you can't have shtei otiyot hainu taima, dilma mitrami shem ben shalosh otiyot, because we're worried not for a 2-letter name, right? Obviously, if there's a 2-letter name and both letters are missing below, nothing's there. You can't fill in a word that doesn't exist. But we're worried that you're going to have a 3-letter name, right? And only one of the letters will be there in the bottom, and you're going to add in the other 2 and say they forgot to write them. But then you are havile ruba dishma. Then you're adding in the majority of the name, and that was a step too far. So you can't do that. You can't add in a majority of the name, and therefore 2 letters would be a problem. 1 letter is never a problem, because the worst that can happen is you have a name of 2 letters. They had no single letter names. There was no X's back then. And so therefore you always have to have at least half the name will already be there. So that is why 2 is a problem. Amar Rav Papa now, 7 lines on the bottom, says Rav Papa in this same discussion about letters and corrections, Pshitali, it seems very obvious to me that if the word in the shtar above says sefel, right? I lend him, or I borrow from him, or I sell him a sefel. Now, sefel means a cup, okay? Milamala. And in the bottom of the shtar, it says kepel, with a kuf. And a kefel, I guess, right? Not kepel. Kefel is like a coat of some sort. So meaning it's different words, but there's 1 letter between them, right? right? So Rashbam says a talit, right? Oh, kefel is from folding it, right? Because you can fold it up. There's other, he has other things. Anyways, so let's say above in the star it says one object, and below in the star it says another object, which is one letter off, right? So how do you interpret that? So before we were talking about adding in letters, right? If you had two words of a name, two letters of a name, and you were missing one, you could fill in the third letter. What if it's contradictory, or not contradictory, but different? Says Rav Papa, Hakol holech achar tachton. I definitely think that you go after the bottom one and you assume that there was some, smudge or something. And really it should say kefel. And the sefel was a little bit mistaken. Again, the difference between a samach and a kuf, you understand, is that a samach is closed and a kuf is open. So otherwise they're very similar. So basically what happened was that it got a little bit ruined on the top, but it really meant to say kefel, right? You go after the bottom one. But asked Rav Papa, what about the opposite one? Boy, Rav Papa, what if it's the opposite? What if it's kefel milamala? It has a kuf in the higher one and refers to the coat, or the talit, and it's a sefel milamata. It has a closed samach on the bottom. So there, how do you get open basically if something was meant to be closed, right? How do you understand that basically it was meant to be a kuf on the top and somehow on the bottom it became a samach? How did that change? What do you say? Do you say mi chashinan lizvuv? Do you worry that maybe it could be kuf, sorry, at the bottom? Why is it closed? Because basically a fly could land on it, right? You wrote this thing down, the ink is still wet. A fly, which were pervasive in parts of the world where they didn't have sanitation in old times, a fly lands on the parchment, lands on the or whatever you wrote it on, lands on the ink, and drags the ink a little bit up by a tiny bit, and turns your closed kuf into your open kuf, sorry, into a closed samach. So do you have to worry about that and say maybe in fact instead of going after the bottom one, maybe you should go after the top and assume that the bottom was an error because it just seems to make sense that way. Or do you say no, that you go after what our Mishnah says, that you always go after the bottom one, teku, so we actually don't have a clear answer in that case, right? And it obviously gets to the bigger case, which is that you have to look at the context, right? How do you explain what happened? So if you have a plausible explanation, that might supersede the rule of the Mishnah, which is that you go after the bottom at all times. So that was what Rav Papa said. The final.
It's easier to say that the top was open and it closed than to say that the top was closed and it was open due to a smudge. How would the smudge remove a closed
Right. No, that
letter
correct.
and so
That's Rav Papa's point. Rav Papa is saying that in this case, if the top is open and the bottom is closed, it seems a little bit more logical to say that the top is correct. It's supposed to be open. The bottom got closed because a fly landed there and closed it. Correct, 100%. So that's why Rav Papa is saying, in this case, it seems a little more logical that in fact the bottom one is wrong and the top one is right. The Mishnah said you always go after the bottom one. The alternative explanation is probably that he made a mistake. Right, the Sofer was writing quickly and he wrote the wrong thing. But obviously, that's a little stretch to say that the Sofer wrote the wrong
but
thing.
why do they accept? No, I don't. Okay, but why do they accept the first discussion that Seifo, if it was written above and the Kefo below, why do they accept that? That's a question.
Because there you would always say that the bottom one was meant intentionally, that it was left open, and the upper one got smudged. Again, it
You
seems
want to
much
say
more
the upper
logic
one is smudged? Why not say the bottom one, the ink was smudged?
because then you wouldn't be open. If you see a smudge, you'll see it. The point is, if something is smudged, you'll be closed, not open. Right? So again, the specific circumstance, if you write something that's open, you can see very easily how it will become closed
Right.
by a fly or a smudge. If you write something that's closed, it's very hard to imagine that becoming open, right? You can't erase things without it being clear. That was like last week's hold off, right? Is that you can't erase things without knowing about it usually. So how do you go from open by mistake to become, sorry, closed with a samach to become open?
And they accept that.
They
That's what it says. It says Sefer
correct.
Minamata,
That's
the Kefer
that's when it was written on
Minamata,
the top and the
and they
bottom.
and they accept that. Why is that
Correct.
accepted? That's the question I have.
Sorry, what's accepted?
It's if it's Sefer Milamala, the Kefer Milamata, right? So we accept what is written below. So
Right.
why do they accept something? How do you make the smudge open something?
You can't. You assume that
So
below
a
is
sefer
correct.
was closed and
No,
Kefa was,
the bottom always is the winner, right? So you assume that the correct thing is open. It was written open in both places. The top one got smudged, so it's a mistake. So that's easy, right? Because the bottom is open and the bottom supersedes it. The question is, what if the bottom is the closed one? Do you still say we always go with the bottom and have to assume that whoever's writing the top, I mean, the same sofer, that they weren't paying attention when they wrote the top or some other mistake? It was just an editing mistake. Or in this case, you say, well, since logically it seems like a closed thing would be a smudge from an open thing, that we assume it's the open one, which is the top, or not, and that is teku. Continues the Gemara, Hahu, we're 5 lines from the bottom, right? Hahu dahavi ketiv bei. Now, there was a document, a star, that said in it the following: Shit mea vizuza. I'm going to give you 600. We don't know 600 of what, and a zuz, right? A zuz is a dinar, right? 600 and a dinar. So what does that mean? Is it 601 dinar, which obviously doesn't sound like it? 600 what? So Sholchu Rav Sharve Kamei Abaya. So Rav Sharve sent a message from Rav Abaya and saying, you know what I think it means? Sheit me'a istiri, 600 prutot, right? Istiri are sorry, istiri are not, they're opposite. Istiri are large coins, right? So a pruta is very small. A dinar is larger. So I think 48 of a pruta, 48 prutot in a dinar. A sela is four zuz, right? 4 dinar. So I think it means 600 istiri, so 600 larger coins, right? Sela, and 1 zuz. So basically I'm saying, imagine like it's $100 bills, let's say, $600 bills and a 10 or something, right? A zuz is smaller. So that's one possibility. Odilmar, maybe it's the exact opposite. Maybe it's Sheit Mea Priti, 600 prutot, which is like 600 prutot, which is a very small amount, right? 200 prutot is 1 sela, basically, right? Or 4 dinar. So is it like a smaller amount and 1 zuz? So how do you know which way to go? Because clearly it doesn't mean 600 zuz and 1 zuz, or you would have never said it that way. So is it a higher coin or is it a lower coin? So Abai said to this messenger, to Sharve, Sharve, Amarle dal priti. It's impossible to mean prutot. The lo katkatvi b'shtara. Nobody writes prutot in a star. It's like saying, I'm going to get a mortgage of 4 million pennies, right? No one puts prutot. Prutot are pennies. They're very, very small. No one puts those in a star. Da suchi maskinlei. You would combine them together to make a larger number, right? You'd put them into dollars, or in their case, dinar and sela. So therefore, prutot are impossible. Umash zuzi, you would have turned them into the number of zuz on top of kuf samach zayin amid aleph. So no one ever writes 600 prutot. So what is it, right? My amrit. So what are you going to say? Is it shaped mea istiri v'zuza? Is it 600 istiri, meaning very expensive ones in a zuz? Or so Abai said, no, it's not that. It's sheit mea zuzi v'chad zuza, right? Is it the other possibility? And this is his answer. Is that it's again? There's different girsot here, as you can see, but the girsa I'm reading, which is not necessarily in the Rabbeinu Hanano, is it the alternative? I'm sorry, in Rashbam, is it 600 zuz and 1 zuz? Although it sounds very weird. And the answer is Yad Balashtar al Tachtona, that the Yad Balashtar is on the bottom, meaning rather than saying you owe me 600 sela, which is a larger number, you can only be 600 zuz, even though it's written very unusually. So you'd have to prove the higher one in order to get that. But prutot are off the table. Nobody writes 600 prutot, and therefore it's not even a possibility that that's what he meant. And so that was sort of the answer. Again, it always will depend, as we're learning in our Gemara, on the circumstance based on what a person does in their neighborhood and what people commonly do. Ken, you have to run right now, or you have 5 more minutes?
No, I'm leaving. In the next 2 minutes, maybe.
Okay, 2 minutes we're going to do. Amar Abai, third line from the top, 2 minutes, literally. Let's say a person wants to show their signature in Beit Din, right? Beit Din wants to say, there are a lot of complicated cases about this, but you signed on a star. You can't prove that you signed on a star. You don't have witnesses. You can't testify yourself because of complicated situations. They say to you, look, write your signature on a page, like when you go to vote, right? Write your signature on the page and let's see if it matches. So you want to show your signature on a Beit Din. The problem is that if you sign your signature on a page and you don't know what happens to that page, you can get into very big trouble because someone could find that piece of paper that says your name on it and they can write on top of it, I borrowed $1 million, right? So says Abaya, if you're going to sign your signature on a blank page to prove what your signature looks like, lo lachve besof migilta. Don't ever sign on the bottom of the page, right? Dilma mishkech acher. Someone else might find it, the katav, and they might write on top of it the maslik beisusi that you borrowed $100 from them. Vitnan, and we learned that if you find this star, even if you can't prove it, you show a piece of document that says, I owe you money. It's not a regular star because it doesn't have witnesses and a call that you can collect. And so it would be very, very dangerous to do that. Okay. So one more minute. We're going to do it. Says the Gemara. So we have a story. Hahu bizvina bizbana. Sorry, bazbana. There was
I'm gonna leave the Gemara on. I'm going out the door.
Then we'll stop here if you're going out the door. Okay, Shavua Tov, wonderful to learn. We'll pick it up tomorrow morning. Not me, I think Rabbi David. Have a great day, everyone.